going on? Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. My name is Brian Perez, and we are here until 4 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday, the 27th of August, 2024, and we would love to hear from you. The way to get your question answered is to call us at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. Another way you might get your question answered is to send it on the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger or by going to our flagship radio station's website, kwave.com. Look for the Pastor's Perspective page there. Fill out the form. That gets it to us, but there's no guarantee that we are going to read your question on the radio program. And we don't answer questions online either. It's not a way to open up communication and dialogue and go back and forth and answer every single question that you have. That's why we open up an hour a day of the program to talk to you at 888-564-6173. So talk to us. What's on your mind? What do you want to discuss? Here to answer your questions today, we've got author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, whose website, ChristianityStillMakesSense.com, is a great resource, including to purchase Bobby's latest book, Does Christianity Still Make Sense? It's available on Amazon, Audible, Kindle, and here at the chapel store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. How you doing, Bobby?
Doing good. Good to be with you guys tonight.
Yeah, and here in the studio with me is Richard Semino, one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, sitting in for Brian Broderson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Feeling a little hurried, but well.
You can now breathe. You're here. You're here. All right, give us a call. Let's chat. 888-564-6173. And we'll begin with a question that was sent in on Facebook. It is from Deborah in Huntington Beach, California, who writes, in the past few years, I have struggled to fit into a church body, especially since I moved to a new area. In the past, I've been able to get connected either through my kids, who are now grown up, Bible studies, or volunteering. For some reason, this hasn't seemed to come about, and though I have been going to church for the past few years, I can't seem to connect as I once did. I can't find a Bible study that has room open at a time in which I can go. I tried to volunteer, but they told me I needed to take a class first, which I did, but the list of qualifications and they did not have, nor anything I felt I might be able to do was at different times my work could allow. I can't afford to do some of the women's events, and though I try to go to the free events, I just feel more alone in the crowd. I try talking to people, and a couple of people in ministry try to introduce me to others, but it just kind of drops from there. It's kind of a weird limbo thing. Don't get me wrong, the churches are great, and I'm reading, listening, praying. I try to evaluate if it's something I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm not hearing what God is trying to get across, or if I'm just in a different place right now. Things have not been the easiest, and I really miss the deep connection and fellowship I once had. Bobby, what would you say to Deborah? And this is so funny because there are some people who, they just want to go to church on Sundays, get there, leave, etc. Deborah's looking for connection. I mean, she really wants to get involved, and there's a lot of doors closing here with maybe small group ministries or whatever that are meeting during the times that she's working or otherwise unavailable. But how would you encourage Deborah to not give up?
Yeah, I mean, it can be so challenging. And so finding, a church that you feel good about that has, a good fit for your schedule. I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, it could be that there's a church that's very small, which is great, but they might not be able to accommodate the various needs of people's schedules. That's one of the benefits of a larger church, where you can have different opportunities to plug in to community. And so I would say she's got to just get a hold of what her schedule's like, and then, figure out, which church she can find that type of a community in. I do think that if somebody's a part of a church and they can't plug in because of when the groups are offered, then you might have to look at that going, you know what, I'd love to be a part of this church, but it's costing me a connection. So therefore, I'll look at maybe some other options to do that. But there is definitely churches that are out there that would have, ministries that I'm sure somebody could plug into. I mean, churches that are larger have, so many various times, from morning studies to evening studies, to every day of the week. And so I think that that's really important. I do think that you can be creative too. You have to realize as Christians that sometimes you're a part of a church, right? And this is the danger, I think, of getting busy. Like, one of the things that we're passionate about at Image Church is not over complicating people's lives. So what can end up happening is you could become a busy church, and that can look like this. So somebody's already serving in the community. Let's say they've got a ministry that they're a part of, and then they come to your church. But in order to be considered part of the mature, you have to serve that church as well. So then you figure out a way to do that. And I think sometimes we just need to be more creative and flexible in the church and go, look, people can be a part of our church, but because of their schedules, it might just mean that they have service that they're doing in the community. And that's great. We don't have to own that. We can just celebrate that this person's plugged in there. And then also you can find Christian friends maybe that, aren't in your particular church that you can do life with on your own schedule. So you might say, I love the worship, I love the teaching, I'm just having a hard time finding community. Well, then maybe you can find some Christian friends without leaving your church by just meeting up for lunch once a week. You don't have to have it be a programmed type of a ministry. You can just do life on life. So if you have a friend that you can meet with once a week that's a Christian, that's great. That can serve that need, and you don't have to feel like you have to be in a small group. I mean, what the purpose of small group is just to get people to become spiritual conversationalists, to have, a place to talk about the Lord together, a place to pray together, a place to learn together. You can do that in a one-on-one situation. Now, I'm not advocating people drop out of their small groups, but I'm just saying in this situation, you got to be open to different options.
Richard Cimino.
Well, I really want to encourage you, number one, with don't give up. You're not alone in this. I'm sure that there are so many people who haven't said what you've said to us. They feel and experience what you're experiencing, and so you're not alone. And I would encourage you to think small. If you can make a good connection with one person in a church, that one person could be just invaluable to your life. Think small in terms of, or think slow in terms of how do you develop a relationship like that. It takes time before fellowship is something that's deep and experienced, and you have that sense of safety and security where you can be really open. Where you can really begin to share the things that touch you most. But I think it's to start small and to think as well as it's good to just talk about the Word of God with somebody, especially at church. If you go to a church and you go to a Sunday gathering, there's usually some space carved out somewhere where it's turn and greet one another. Mm-hmm. And you could probably preempt that before the service even starts. Start up a conversation with the people you're sitting next to, and who knows, you see them again next week. Mm-hmm. You see them again the week after. A lot of times people do serve at a church, and that's where they make their acquaintances. Like working in a children's ministry, you start to meet a whole lot of adults bringing children. Mm-hmm. There are just different ways that different people make their connection. But I know that from what it looks like, you've tried a number of different things. So don't give up. Think small, and then let's give it time to grow into a place where, wow, I have a connection with this person or these persons.
Good advice from Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino today on Pastor's Perspective. Deborah, thank you for writing in on Facebook Messenger, and we hope that helps. 888-564-6173, our number today, 888-564-6173. Let's go to Marianne, who is listening on the K-Wave app in San Bernardino, California. Welcome to the program, Marianne.
Thank you.
Yeah, what's going on? You had a question about the Bema Seat of Christ.
Yes, the white throne judgment or something like that. I don't really understand any of that, and I would like to see if you can give me the simple version.
All right, Bobby Conway, what would you say?
So it's helpful if we can distinguish the Bema seat from the Great White Throne Judgment. The Great White Throne Judgment in the book of Revelation refers to the judgment of non-believers that will take place after the millennium. The Bema seat, you can actually see, that if you go to Corinth, left over from some of the archaeological ruins. But this is more of a judgment for Christians as it relates to rewards. And so there is this idea of remunerative justice. In remunerative justice, there's retributive justice, right? Like where, you get what you deserve. Remunerative justice is where God praises you for the work that he did in you. And so we learn about, the crowns that are going to be given and awards that are going to be given for faithful service during our earthly life. And Jesus sits upon the Bema seat, so to speak, where you would have people in the ancient Olympian games. The judge would sit on a Bema seat and then pass out awards to the Olympians that would compete. Well, similarly, this is a judgment for believers. And that's pretty cool to think about God praising you for the work that he does in you. And then you see in Revelation where they cast their crowns back at his feet. And I think, boy, Lord, help me not to reach for an empty head. Help me to have something to cast your way because that's pretty cool. So that's a celebratory judgment, remunerative justice versus retributive judgment, which is a condemnatory judgment.
Does it make more sense now, Marianne?
Yes, it does. I really appreciate that. I didn't know that the white throne judgment was for unbelievers. So thank you for clarifying all of that. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for calling in today.
Yes, of course. That's where Richard's going to stand before the great white throne for his,
For cutting it close and getting on time to today's
Almost
program.
not making it today.
Yes. Marianne.
My buddy Richard.
I'm so glad you have my back.
Yeah, right.
Of course. Thanks for calling in today. 888-564-6173 is the number. And how about now we go to Carol in Carlsbad watching us on YouTube. Let's wave to Carol. Hi there. How can we help?
Well, I had some information years ago from my pastor's wife that I thought has really helped me most of my life, and I would like your opinion on it. She said you cannot help the first thought that comes into your mind, but you can the second, third, and fourth, because who knows where the first thought's from, the Lord, the devil, your flesh, or whatever. And so I'd like your opinion on what she told me, but it's really helped me. Thanks.
Well, hold on before you go. So what is this pertaining to? Is this pertaining to
any kind of
temptation, or what kind of thoughts are you thinking or talking about here?
I'm thinking any kinds of thoughts that come into your mind, when you first get them the first time, it can be for any reason. If you're sitting here, you think a bad thought comes into your mind, who's it from? Or if you start to practice things, I get the message from Lord, don't practice, what you're going to say to people. He'll give me the right words at the right time. So I want to know. I try to evaluate that first thought and decide, is it from the right people or the wrong people? And I try to just say, that's when you're taking every thought captive. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Richard, are you tracking here?
No, not really.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if...
I would say when it comes to the area of temptation, like say specifically for a man, if he looks at a woman, the first thought is just... it just comes. The next one, you go, no. Mm-hmm. That's the no.
Right. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and so
in these situations, that first thought might not be a good thought. So yeah. I want to evaluate every single one.
And the second thought is really needs to be calibrated by who God is and what God has said to be true, and who God is and what He asks of us in a given moment. It's about, will this next thought, will it come in line with the holiness of God, or will it not? And that's why you have to make that decision. No, the second thought's not a great idea.
So I get that when it comes to temptation and things, but I mean, there could be other times. What if your first thought is a good thought? So if you're only talking about temptation or that sort of thing, yeah, I guess it would be the first thought may not be the best way to go. But I mean, what if that first thought is walk away from this right now? And you're going to say, oh, that was my first thought. Let me stick around to see what the next thought is. I mean, I don't know. Bobby, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a sense like the emergence of thoughts.
Yep.
Thoughts just emerge and they kind of happen to us, right? And it would be very hard to know. I mean, that's just where the Lord could bottom us out. Like what kind of subconscious things were we dwelling on? I think that there are thoughts that can begin to emerge in our life impulsively or unexpectedly, but it could be because we had previously had intentional thoughts about the thought that became unintentional. So it's interesting how like the way we think can produce unintentional thoughts, but that's part of the problem with intentional thoughts if we're not thinking about the right thing. So take, for example, if somebody's just, cooking with lust all the time, and then the person tries to deal with that, well, all of a sudden these thoughts emerge. Well, these thoughts seem like they're, coming just unnaturally, but it's a result of cooking with lust and being very intentional in the past. So all that to say, I'm thinking about this, that could be part of it. And then, yes, I do think there's just times where, I felt like that today. There were different times where maybe a thought would pop in my mind and I would think, I'm not going to own that thought. That's not my thought. Like if I was judgmental or something, or if I looked down on somebody for something, I thought that I think sometimes that can happen. In particular, you walk into a coffee shop, for example. Somebody doesn't look at you the right way and you make a judgment about that person. Now that person doesn't like me, or that person's mean, or that person's a jerk. That's such an easy thing for us to do. And we're constantly having those thoughts come at us. And what Christian sanctification will allow us to do is to go, you know what, we don't know that person. And that thought, I'm not going to even own that, because what you can start doing is beating yourself up and go, man, I'm such a judgmental person and what's going on with me? So being aware of those first thoughts when they come, and then just shedding them, and then just trying to put a proper thought. Well, that person's created in God's image, and maybe to say a prayer for the person instead.
Richard?
Yeah, that last sentence actually is exactly what I wanted to throw out here for thought. Is there are times when we might see some people and their life, like some people that are just living on the street, and they're walking down the street talking to themselves, and they're just their lives are broken, horribly broken, and it's easy to think, well, how did that guy mess his life up, and how did he get here? We don't know how that person got to that point. And I remember in one of Char's sermons, he was talking about, he quoted some guy who said that told the story of a guy who was walking through an airport. And he said the guy made it a point at a certain point walking through the airport to look directly at them and to think, image of God, image of God. And that halts us from wanting to race to judgment that we don't know anything about. We just feel bummed that sometimes that their behavior, their broken behavior, their emotional, their mental brokenness, how it affects us, how it makes it like, uncomfortable to be around, or we feel threatened by it. And it's so easy for us to just want to run to imagine how that person got to this place in their life. And more likely than not, maybe there weren't a bunch of really good decisions that led to their I've known guys that, in Grass Valley, it was like that guy took one too many hits of LSD. And he's not the same guy ever again. He'll never go back. Yeah. And everybody knew he was dropping acid. And one day a batch of bad acid went through the town of Grass Valley, and he got some of that acid. And that one hit that he took off of that acid, it was the end of him as his parents knew him. Wow. And you could see his parents broken over it. But then, you see him and you go, well, this guy's still bearing the image of God. How am I going to think of him? How am I going to treat him? But I just think, man, this is, I'm really glad you brought that up about relationally and walking into a store or walking into a room of people, Bobby, because we can run everywhere. We can go, oh, that guy looks like he's such a jerk, right? Like we can just think that. It's like, have you ever met him? No. I'm sure people look at me and go, look at that guy. He's such a jerk. Like, anyway.
Not about you, Richard.
Oh, yeah.
I think people see Richard and go, I want to know that guy. I want to get to know him. Bobby, what say you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, boy, and I can feel that sometimes. You have people where I think that, I get so focused in my work. If I'm in a coffee shop and so I go, boy, I've got a serious face if I'm not smiling. I got these deep set eyes, and I could see people thinking, man, look at this jerk. And I mean, I'm just working, but unfortunately the way that my face rests, and then I've even had moments where I'm sitting and I'm like trying to put a grin on my face while I'm working, cause just to soften my exterior, so then I'm sitting there like, oh, this feels really stupid. And then I'll hear like, oh, it's good for the brain. Like, to put a little smirk on your face. It's like healthy to have a smile. Like people who smile, they're happier. So then I'm like, okay, I'll try that. But whatever happens when I close my mouth, the resting face just is serious. But I had this even happen today. I mean, I was going into Starbucks, got out of my car. I never carry cash on me. I just happened to have some cash, and I grabbed a 20 out of the console, got out of the car, and I was met by a homeless lady. And she says, excuse me, sir, you wouldn't happen to have $1, would you? My first thought is I don't like to give cash away. I've done this in the past. I've tried to help, and you just get burned. But immediately I just sensed, give her that 20. I just handed her the whole thing. Now, what she does is between her and the Lord, but I was like, certainly there's people sometimes that just have a genuine need. And I just felt like, you know what? I don't know her story. I don't know her situation. And I had a change of perspective just immediately. I hope that I followed the Lord in that. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll just share this one because then we can move on, I think. But when I was first on staff here, so I had so much I had to learn that I didn't know then, that I'm so thankful that God was so patient with me. But on a Christmas day, through the mail slot in our apartment across the street, somebody left a note. And I thought you'd pick it up on a Christmas day. You think, oh, this is a little Christmas wish or whatever. And it was like, Pastor Richard, I just wanted to tell you that I feel like you're so uncaring and unkind. I've passed you so many times, and you don't even acknowledge me.
Wow.
And I'm thinking like, wow. And I started to think like, how many times I would walk across the parking lot, like from the south building to the front office, and I would have something on my mind, and I'm just looking down. I'm not aware of anything around me. I'm thinking, and maybe there's a frown as I'm thinking or whatever. But I felt like, wow, I need to get my eyes up. I need to be, get my head on a turret and be looking around me. And I can still try to think about whatever it is I'm on my way to talk about or whatever. But that was really striking to me, like how you can not intentionally hurt somebody, but they feel hurt because you just didn't acknowledge their presence. But when you don't know they're there, that's kind of a me problem, I think, in a way. Like, get your head up and look. So anyway.
Bobby?
Yeah, and then at the same token, that person,
they ran with their thoughts.
The insight for him, he's running with his thoughts, and that's kind of being judgmental, and he's forming opinions of you. And maybe the best thing that he could do is like, hey, you know what? Maybe that's just the way he walks. Maybe he's thinking. Maybe he's preoccupied. Don't make this about me.
Yeah.
And so I think that interestingly enough, there's ways that we can all learn from this, but boy, it can be a lot of pressure too on us, right? I remember specifically when I was younger, just kind of my tendency would be just to walk by people and say hello, how are you, smile, and then at some point I just started saying hi, and then I noticed people, I would say hello, and they just wouldn't say anything, and then I started getting frustrated, thinking, well, what the heck? I just said hello to you. And then it still bothers me, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't like, if somebody says hello to me, I can't imagine if somebody was kind enough to say hello that I would just look at the person like they're crazy. But I can't tell you how many people do that.
Yeah.
You walk by, you say hello, or you open up a door and you hold it, and you're just standing there holding it for a bunch of people, and they just walk in. And I'm thinking, well, you're entitled, jerk. Well, pretty soon, if it's tempting just to, like, you know what, I'm not going to open a door for people. I'm not going to say hello to people. And, even in my neighborhood, like, I find myself, like, I'm driving by cars in my neighborhood, and, you want to wave, but then now I'm at the point where I'm gun shy. Like, I don't want to wave, because then it's like, if they don't wave back. So now I'm going through life kind of crippled and gun shy. So, this has become a problem, all this, interaction that we do with one another. It'd be nice if we could just have, you say hello and I say hi back. I open a door, you say thank you. I say thank you, you say you're welcome. But this isn't the world we live in. But the answer is not to shut down on it either.
Yeah. That's where we have to rethink.
Yeah. No, great advice, guys, because I struggle with that same thing, Bobby. And I come away, I'll like walk by somebody. I'm like you, I'll just, hi, total strangers, whatever. And when they don't say anything back, I just kind of think, especially if it's the same person, like if it's a random stranger, okay, I'm never going to see them again. And but then when it's every day or every few weeks, you might see that same person, either a neighbor or a coworker. Yes, Jay Nichols over there. No, it's just like frustrating. It's like, did I do something to you? Can we talk about this? Did you maybe hear some wrong information about me, or why do you hate me? That's what I want to know. But I don't know. I guess it's just a complex. I need to get over it, and I will. Thanks to Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino. 888-564-6173 is our
company.
Yeah, for sure. Carol, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. We'll get to more of your calls in just a few minutes, but our break is coming up really quick. Let me bring this up because it's a question we get often, and we were just talking about it. The image of God. What does it mean? What does that term mean, the image of God? Because people think it means that we look like God physically, but nobody's ever seen God, so how would we know what the image of God is? Bobby?
So, I mean, it's really tough. There's a lot of opinions on the image of God. What it means to be created in the image of God doesn't mean that we are God. Where God says to Moses, "Tell him I am sent you," and then Kenneth Copeland said, "And I am too." And I'm like, no, you're not. That's a wrong way to understand what it means to be I am. When God says I am, he's saying I'm self-existent. We're contingent. So God's not physical. So the image of God doesn't mean that just because we're creating his image that, okay, well, we're physical, so God's physical. So it kind of shakes out to be something like what we would infer from Scripture is that just as God is a rational being, we're rational. Just as God emotes, we emote. Though some philosophers, if they're Thomists in their tradition, they would not believe that God emotes like we do, that's just anthropopathism, ascribing human emotions to God. Just as God is volitional, we're volitional. And just as God's a moral being, we're moral. So moral, volitional, rational, emotional.
I think now we know. We never have to answer that question again the rest of the year. We'll just tell people to go back and listen to the August 27th, 2024 episode of Pastor's Perspective. All right, there's the music. We've got to take a break. We will be back in just a few minutes with more of your questions. Grab an open line. The phone number is 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino are here until 4 p.m. Pacific time to answer your questions at 888-564-6173. Noema, looks like you hung up. Please call back. We would love to chat with you. Everyone else on the board, hang on. We'll get to you hopefully before 4 p.m. Pacific time, but right now it's time to take that break on Pastor's Perspective. Sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. Hi, welcome back to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. I know I just said that a few minutes ago, but I want to say it again. Biola.edu is the website where you can go to get more details about Biola. And answering your questions today on Pastor's Perspective are Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino. Bobby is the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, also author of the new book, Does Christianity Still Make Sense? Available on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, and here at the chapel store of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Richard Cimino is joining me too. He's in the studio sitting in for Brian Broderson. Richard is one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and we would love to chat with you. We've got about 25 minutes left on the program, so let's see how many of you we can get to before the program ends at 4 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday, the 27th. 888-564-6173 is our number, and let's go to Lake Forest. Here is Sean with a question about Satan. Go ahead, Sean. What's your question?
Oh, hey, guys. My question is, I heard it earlier when the lady talked about it, is Satan initiating her thoughts, or is it God? And I've always wondered what kind of access Satan or the devil, however we call him, has access to our mind. Is he? I know he's omnipresent, or how he's everywhere. How anytime if there's a temptation I face, is that just Satan? He's just setting that up, or is that just part of life as how we live it as a fallen man? And he can't be everywhere orchestrating temptation on everybody, or can he? I guess my question is, I know he doesn't have access to my mind, or he doesn't know my thoughts or my heart like the Lord does. So I'm just curious where he stands with his access, if that makes sense.
Okay, Bobby, we'll start with you. What do you say to Sean?
Well, he's not omniscient, having all knowledge, because he is a created being. Now, why is that? I mean, for example, he doesn't understand what every moment, and by the way, a moment is a time concept. So before time began, there wasn't moments, there was just present. But if you were to take what it was like in full to be present as God, Satan would not know what that's like, right? Like he would not know what it's like to have been eternal, because he's not eternal. So there's lots of things that he wouldn't know as a result of being a created being. But he is incredibly knowledgeable because he's been around for a very long time. And so how long after God creates did it take for him to create the evil one? He wasn't originally created as evil one either. We just don't know exactly the timetable for sure, but we can say that he's been around before even humanity came into being. So he is a student of history, and he understands the rise and fall of empires. He knows what makes people tick. So you can imagine that there is no more intelligent being on the dark side than the evil one. Angels would be incredibly brilliant too. I mean, just by observation, understanding events. So imagine if you've just existed for thousands upon thousands of years and saw the rise and fall of empires. I mean, he is accumulated a lot of knowledge. And so then he's got his minions that he sends out to do his work, and they're very aware of what's going on. But how he rations them to go out and do his biddings on each of us and what all that looks like, it's hard to tell. But certainly he does not know everything about us, but he knows what makes us tick, and he knows what our weaknesses are, and he will do whatever he can to work against God's plan for the church. And getting us to fall into temptation is his big victory.
Richard?
Yeah. I'm not sure that I've ever heard anybody give the apparatus, like how does he, sometimes there's just the reality of just demonic oppression, and just you sense it, you know it, and there are thoughts that you wouldn't normally think. There are doubts that come your way. We don't know exactly how does that What's the mechanism? I don't know. Bobby, you may have read someone or seen something, but what I do know is that he is constantly opposed to God, and he's opposed to people knowing God, and he's opposed to people making God known and great in this world, and he wages war against us. Paul talks about it. We're not wrestling against flesh or blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places. Like, that's a heavy phrase, spiritual wickedness in high places. So there's a battle that's being waged. I think C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters are super helpful to understand the strategies and the wiles of the devil. And even the Apostle Paul said, we're not ignorant of his devices. I mean, sometimes his playbook is, he tips off the pitch he's going to throw, so to speak, because we've seen it, or we've heard and seen in the scriptures the way he works. But I would say, like, well, how does he plant thoughts in our minds? I don't know how that would work, but I know there are things, and I'll just go, that is not of God, and I surely don't dream that up for me, so.
For sure.
Yeah, no, that's a good word. I mean, you do see Jesus say, like, Satan has, enticed you or so there is this sense where that can happen that we both recognize, but you're right. I mean, like, the how of that is very interesting. Like, how does an invisible spirit being plant and suggest something to us in a physical state? So you think about, like, the invisible transfer of a suggestive thought to a physical being in a physical concrete world. So you think he's probably operating, obviously with our immaterial spirit. I think that would probably be something that's happening. So maybe spirit to spirit. And then that's where you even think about, like, there's so much we don't understand, even how the subconscious that we have, shakes out to influence, our conscience realm. So it's not, out of the ordinary that we're stuck trying to even understand that, like the interaction between our subconscious and conscience. But it does interact, and it has a way of influencing it. And so similarly, the evil one can influence, whether he does that on a subconscious level. It seems like that's probably the case more often, not because we're not always aware consciously of what he's doing. So then if that's in the subconscious realm that he's dealing with it, then we would be, it would be sort of hidden from us to have a sense of how that's all going on anyway. So it makes sense that we wouldn't understand that interaction. So that's why we have to take every thought captive when it does emerge, to make sure that we're not led astray.
Yeah, and Peter says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Like, there needs to be a readiness on our part. I think it's very unhealthy to be constantly paranoid, looking for the devil under your bed or in everything in every moment. But it says be sober-minded, like, be clear-minded, and be watchful. We do have an adversary, and he's not a slouch. He is brilliant, he's powerful, and he has minions, and we just need to be watchful, be mindful, and we watch the world through the lens of what God has made known about himself in the Word of God.
Sean, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Really quick, again, the book that Richard Cimino mentioned, The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And also, if you're here locally in Southern California next month, Screw Tape on Stage. That is a stage presentation of the Screw Tape Letters. I got to see it a few years ago, and it's going to be in Irvine, California, a few other places too. Did I just see Charlotte, North Carolina? It's going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina. Maybe Bobby can go. But so check that out. You can find out more.
I've been to it.
Have you? Yeah, it's really good. Fellowship for Performing Arts. That's who puts this together, FPA. You can find out more at fpatheater.com. Okay, back to the phones. Sean, thanks for calling. Let's talk to Daniel in Redlands, California. What's going on, Daniel?
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
this pretty much circles back to the image of God discussion we were having earlier. I wanted to get your thoughts on, I noticed that in the media and in news reports, the Shroud of Turin keeps coming back, it keeps mentioning. And I take it as a sign that we are to be reminded of our Lord Jesus Christ. But the word, the Bible does that all the time. But I kind of feel that I'm not trying to fall for the hype, but it feels like we keep getting reminded. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Reminded in what way? Like reminded to what? Just reminded that Jesus is real? What are you trying to...
Remind to all of us. You were also mentioning about having busy lives and distractions, and this is kind of like something that I feel that we've been reminded when the news reports come out with topics as this, as the Shroud of Turin, that in a way we're being called back. This is the way I feel at this moment.
Okay, Bobby, what do you think?
Well, the Shroud of Turin, and Turin, referring to Turin, Italy, it is a very fascinating discovery. And I've interviewed Dr. Gary Habermas on this on YouTube, where he is an expert on the Shroud of Turin, which is basically the wrapping that Jesus was wrapped in, a shroud. And the dialogue is this an authentic shroud that would have been the one that they wrapped Jesus in, the garments? And when you unwrap this, it's about 6 feet long, and it's fascinating because if you were to look at kind of the markings that have been left there, it's astonishing because of some of the work that they're able to do. They're able to get an image, and through the imaging that it shows, it's pretty impressive. You can tell that it was a crucified victim. Where the blood comes out, you could tell, that Jesus was pierced in his side, and that there is a marking. And you can see the marking of blood in the exact place where it would have spilled out had he been pierced. So when you're looking at some of the markings and considering the dating and all of this, it would be astonishing if that was actually the shroud. I don't think we can know for sure, but I do think that there is great evidence for this particular artifact. And what I like about it is if that's the case, this is the only image that we have of the person of Jesus of Nazareth. And so what that kind of does for me is if I am going to leverage a picture to think about Jesus, at least I've got something that you can focus on that is an actual person that experienced crucifixion, believed to be in the first century, with these blood markings that would be consistent with the kind of death that Jesus experienced. And that's pretty phenomenal. So I think it's an impressive piece of evidence that's been left behind.
So you mentioned Gary Habermas, and it looks like he did some kind of a documentary or something a few months ago. It's called The Shroud Face to Face. You can find out more about it at theshroudfilm.com. Shroud is spelled S-H-R-O-U-D, theshroudfilm.com. Have you had a chance to see this film, either of you, Bobby or Richard?
No.
I haven't. I would like to. I did have a chance to hear a presentation recently on the Shroud. And I thought it was, really good. And it helped me on, because when I was younger, I've shared before on the program that I got in my head, I had this crucifixion picture of Jesus on the cross, and I would pray, And I wasn't praying like thinking that that was actually Jesus, but it helped me. And then all of a sudden I got in my head going, okay, but this is a white dude. We don't even know what he looked like. And so then I found myself really struggling in prayer, because then I didn't have an image that I could focus on, because I didn't want to feel like I was identifying with that image. You know, like there's probably a lot of people when they pray, they think of, Jonathan Rumi, right? And so it's like there's this sense where we can identify. And I just felt like, well, Jonathan Rumi, he's not Jesus, and I don't want to start identifying with that. But the nice thing about the Shroud of Turin, there's so much evidence that you actually have something that could actually be a loose image of Jesus. And that's pretty cool to think about. Like if you go into prayer, it's not like you don't have any evidence there. And, if you're going to use an image, not that you're like worshiping the shroud, but if you're just wanting to think about the death, boy, that's pretty powerful thought.
Daniel, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Did you want to add something, Richard? I'm sorry. No. Okay. Now we're going to go to Azusa, California, because we are everywhere from A to Z in the USA. Azusa. Elsa, welcome to the program.
Hi, pastors. Thank you so much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Hi.
So my question was, I have a friend. She's a childhood friend. I grew up with her at church. I used to babysit her, and she has a 4-year-old son. And she says that ever since he started going to the dad's house, because she's no longer with the baby's father, that he comes back very scared. He's scared of everything. He's scared to go to the restroom. He's scared of food. He's scared of the lights. He's scared of the dark. He's scared to go to school. He's kind of potty training right now at this point, and she says that she's having trouble with him at school. Teachers are calling her, telling her if there's anything going on at home. He doesn't want to go to public restrooms. So I personally think that it's maybe a bad spirit that's maybe bothering him. He sees it maybe. She's tried prayer. She's tried oil. I've asked her, I actually told her, hey, maybe you should do oil. Maybe you should do prayer. I don't know what else to tell her. I don't know what else I could help her with. She's had prayer from other churches, because we're Central American. She's gotten prayer from churches from Central America. She's asked prayers from my mom and dad, from me, from the churches that she goes to different churches. She doesn't have like a home church. I also think it's not good that she's kind of like a lukewarm Christian right now. She's in like the door, but she's not.
Do you know if the boy has been medically evaluated or anything? Has he? I mean, again, you don't want to do everything medically, like, oh, let's prescribe some medication or something, and that's going to take care of this. Yeah. But yeah, Richard, what do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, you always want to pray. But in situations like this, I would say that it would be really wise for that mom to take her child to a child therapist. They have ways of without frightening kids, of helping them express and identify the source of these fears, the source of these phobias that he has, and to find out whether or not is there some abuse that's happening when he's at his dad's house. And they're able to talk to children in ways that the average person and not even the average mom and dad would be able to talk. And, on the parent side, there's so much emotions wrapped up in it that it's hard to be objective. It's hard to be clear. I would highly, highly recommend that she would bring him to, and there are some great Christian counseling / therapy places that you can go to, and that people who the behavioral sciences, they study behavior, and they know how to get to the point of behavior. So that would be my recommendation. That's the first thing that popped in my mind. Not to the exclusion of prayer, not to the exclusion of just getting on your knees and if it's hard to imagine the kind of spiritual stuff that's going on that would bring a little 4-year-old boy to that place.
Yeah.
So,
Bobby Conway?
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's tough to picture, this would be one of those things you think of a little kid, right? It's tough to picture the Lord allowing the evil one to, have a heyday on a little kid. You do learn about like the demoniac, in the Gospels, and that can be tough stuff to understand for sure. So I'm not saying that there's not, spiritual things going on. It can be both too, but definitely what Richard's saying, I would recommend that as well, because this can also be a very scary thing for a kid if a bunch of people are starting to get around him and praying demons away from him and get Satan away from him, like that kind of language could spook a kid out too. So you don't want the kid to think that he's got Satan on his trail or he's possessed, or just try to keep it as even as possible. And that's why looking at that could be helpful.
Richard?
And one more thought comes to my mind, Elsa, is that it's good that you can see where your friend is at. You said, I think she's kind of lukewarm. She's kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But one of the greatest things that can move her, direct her towards Jesus, is for you to not be, diagnosing her spiritual condition, rather than just, as we were talking earlier about the image of God, he says, the Lord, full of compassion. Like, you just be there, you be compassionate, you be steadfast in your love, you encourage her to the various avenues she might pursue, maybe even help her get recommendations for places she could take her son to. But I think, her spiritual well-being will be greatly influenced by just your constancy, by your consistency, by your love, and by your compassion.
Elsa, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's try to squeeze in one more. Jojo in Riverside, California. Go ahead.
Hi, pastors. Thank you for taking my call. The reason why I'm calling is my brother passed away last week on Sunday. And my sister, who is the matriarch of our family, she's going to be having him cremated. My call is because she's having a hard time with the whole, the ashes. He has 2 children that are still living, and she is having a hard time giving them some of the ashes each child. Well, they're not children, but they're adults, but she's having a hard time with that. She's crying. She seems to be thinking that she's going to be taking him apart. In listening to your show, I've heard many times, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when you're absent of the body, you're in the presence of the Lord.
Yep.
I have tried to explain to her, but again, pastors, forgive my ignorance. I don't know how to explain that to her. She's a complete mess. And if you could please help me also understand, after cremation, I know it would become ashes, but what is the purpose of even holding on to them? Do they mean anything? Do they have any value to us?
Richard?
Well, I'm sorry, the last bit about what has value to you? I'm sorry.
The ashes.
The ashes.
Yeah.
For some people, they just are a point of reference, a point of contact. Like, hey, my dad's remains or my siblings' remains are there, and whether I personally wouldn't do that, but I wouldn't condemn anybody who does. But what's really, really clear is that you have to just encourage her that you're not doing anything to him. He's not there. This is not who he is. And we just had a dear friend, his brother-in-law went to be with the Lord, and he shared how they had these conversations, the two of them, as husbands and dads, like, hey, we don't want our family to be spending a fortune on getting us a coffin and a burial site. Like, hey, we'll just we want them to cremate us, so that they're financially intact, and it's no big deal for us.
Yeah. Bobby, any thoughts in 20 seconds?
No, I mean, we all grieve differently, and I would just say, just try to encourage her that it's okay. And if the kids want something like that, it's like the Shroud of Turin, right? It's like, hey, sometimes these relics, it just can be meaningful to somebody, and if that's the case, it's okay.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with splitting up the ashes to different people or anything like that either. Jojo.
God can put it all back together.
That's true. Jojo, thanks for calling. God bless you guys. We will be back tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you.